Our second major category of connective tissues are the supporting connective tissues, and we have two types: cartilage, which has a semi-solid matrix, and bone, which has a solid matrix. So these types of connective tissue form strong and durable frameworks that are going to be responsible for protecting and supporting softer body tissue. Now, the extracellular matrix is going to vary depending on the particular tissue type, and we will examine each of these. Now, when you see chondri or chond, that should tell you cartilage. We'll examine three different types of these. Bone, when you see the prefix oste or osteo, that tells you you're looking at something related to bone. Now remember, I've been preaching all along. Look at the words, look at the prefixes, look at the suffixes. What is the word or the term telling you? So if you get familiar with thinking about things in this way, you'll find that when you get into future classes and the content gets more sticky and more heavyweight, your knowledge of the words and the terminology is certainly going to help you to make sense, to relate it to things that you already know. Cartilage has a firm semi-solid matrix with variable amounts of collagen and elastic fibers. Mature cartilage cells are called chondrocytes. Remember, chondri refers to cartilage, cyte is cell. Chondroblast are immature cells. Chondroblast, cartilage builders. Chondrocytes are found in small spaces called lacunae within the extracellular matrix. Cartilage in its mature state is avascular, hard to heal, surrounded by a covering called the perichondrium. Okay, peri, around, chondri, cartilage. Now, ium really doesn't mean covering, but you're going to see it several times. Think about the pericardium. Peri, around, cardi, heart, ium. It actually means tissue, but we can call it covering because a lot of times these iums are going to be coverings. So the perichondrium is the covering around the cartilage. And we have three types of cartilage. We're going to examine each one of these and talk about ways to identify them individually. Hyaline cartilage is the most common type. The perichondrium that surrounds the cartilage is vascularized, but the cartilage itself is not. So this provides a very flexible support to certain types of structures. Now, the way I always tell my students to identify this is, well, let's look at what we've got here. We've got little spaces. Those are your lacunae. The little things inside those spaces are your chondrocytes. So chondrocytes in lacunae. Well, that's really not going to help us identify the different types of cartilage because all cartilage has chondrocytes in lacunae. What you look at is the extracellular matrix. So look at all of this pink right here. You can see there are teeny tiny little fibers in there. Now those are collagen fibers in there, but you really can't visualize them. So I want you to think of this as chondrocytes in lacunae in a matrix of frosted glass. So this looks like frosted glass. That's how you identify hyaline cartilage. So you find this in areas where things need to be able to move, but to go back to their normal shape, such as the tip of the nose, also in the trachea and the larynx, and of course all of those are part of your respiratory passages. Your costal cartilage, costal refers to the ribs, so the ribs attached to your sternum with pieces of hyaline cartilage. The long bones, when they articulate with another bone and form a joint, articulate means to come together, the ends of those long bones are covered with this smooth hyaline cartilage as well. And that, of course, prevents friction between bones when those joints are moving. And hyaline cartilage also forms most of the fetal skull. We don't start out with bones. We start out with a cartilage template that has to become ossified, turn it into bone. More of that later. Fibrocartilage is our weight-bearing cartilage. So it's got a lot of big protein fibers that are arranged in bundles between the chondrocytes. Now, because there's so many fibers and these chondrocytes are large, there's not a lot of room left for the ground substance. So there's not a lot of it there. Fibrocartilage, though, is important because it resists compression. Therefore, it's a good shock absorber. So it's located in your intervertebral disc, which are between your vertebrae, and also your pubic symphysis, which is where your two pubic bones, part of your pelvic girdle, come together in the anterior, just below your external genitalia, right? Or just deep to your external genitalia. Also, in our knees, the joints of the knees have these little fibrocartilage discs in there called menisci. Singular is meniscus, menisci is plural. And again, it's a shock absorber. It helps to take some of that stress so that we don't end up with compression, or we don't end up with bone on bone. So these are, again, weight-bearing, resistant to compression for you. So in lab, when you're looking to identify this, like I said with the hyaline cartilage, look for the frosted glass matrix, right? Now, when you're looking at fibrocartilage, look for these long, wavy, sort of parallel fibers within there. Now, your elastic cartilage, well, that should tell you something. It's elastic, so it's springy, it's flexible. Bend your ear forward. Let go. Bend it backwards. Let go. Twist it around. Let go. It's just like it was before you started because of the elastic cartilage found in that auricle of the ear. Now, you have densely packed elastic fibers that give resilience and flexibility so things can move, be pushed upon, and go right back to their shape. The perichondrium is vascularized. The cartilage is not. You've got closely packed chondrocytes in the lacunae, and you can see elastic fibers running in all directions. So what I tell students to remember here, think about what you did with your ear. No matter what direction you moved it, it went back because of the elastic. You also have this type of cartilage making up your epiglottis, which is a flap-like structure that closes off your airway when you swallow, so that saliva, food, whatever you're eating, doesn't go down in your air passageways. It can only go down the open part of that tube, which is your esophagus. Our second category of supporting connective tissues is bone, also called osseous tissue. Osseous tissue or bone has a solid matrix, which gives great protection and support, but less flexibility than we have with cartilage. So the extracellular matrix, I'm sorry, I can't talk today. The extracellular matrix of bone connective tissue is made up of organic compounds that include collagen fibers and glycoproteins, and inorganic compounds such as calcium salts. The primary one is calcium phosphate. The cells found within include mature cells called osteocytes, and then we have two other types of cells, osteoblast. What do you know about blast? That's right, they're builders. What do they build? Well, the first part of the word tells you. Oste, bone builders. Osteoclast have the opposite job. Osteoclast break down bone. Now, why do you think you might ever want to break down bone? Bone's pretty important. It protects us. It provides structure, right? Well, it's also where we store calcium. So when you see down here where it says store minerals, if our blood calcium gets low, we can activate osteoclast. So I say clast crash. What do they crash? They tear down bone matrix, releasing calcium so we can get it back into the blood. Now, what are the other functions? Well, muscles attach to bone and allow us to move. Support for other body tissues as things attach to bone, and bone helps to hold things in place. Protect your vital organs. Think about where your heart sits, behind the bones of the thoracic cavity, your ribs, right? Think about your brain. It sits in a bony skull. But another really cool thing, other than storing minerals, which I mentioned a while ago, your bone is where we make our blood cells. Pretty cool stuff, huh? So we have two primary types of bone, compact bone and spongy bone, that make up our bone tissue. Now we're going to look briefly at bone, just like with muscle and nervous tissue, because we're going to actually talk about these in great detail when we get to the chapters that focus on these. But for now, let's look at the two different types of bone. So compact bone is made up of cylindrical structures called osteons. So if you look at this image, this is an osteon, another osteon, another osteon. So they look sort of like the rings of a tree. In the center of each of these osteons, we have something called the osteonic canal, also called the Haversian canal, and that's where the main blood vessels, nerves, and lymphatics for that bone are going to come through. Now, bone is very highly vascularized. Okay, so there are tiny little canals that run through these osteons that the blood vessel and the nerves run through. So the functional unit of compact bone is the osteon. So compact bone is found on the outside of all bones. It looks like a solid structure, but again, there are little spaces and little canals within there. So compact bone is the hard bone. It's protective. It forms almost a solid cover on the outside of all bones and makes up the shaft of our long bones. Your spongy bone, on the other hand, let's see if we've got, nope, we don't have an image of that one. Your spongy bone is made up sort of like a sponge. There's lots of space. Well, that space is not empty in your spongy bone. It's filled with bone marrow. This is where our red marrow is found, and that's where our blood cells are made. So this allows bones to be more lightweight. It also is where when you start losing the little pieces of bone that go together in there and form like little bridges of bone, those are called trabeculae. Like compact bone is made of osteons, spongy bone is made of trabeculae. So when you start breaking that bone down faster than you make it is when we develop a condition called osteoporosis, holy bones.